So what I was going to do in this session was go through basically this one-page worksheet available on the site. So Sarah's talked in great detail about the gold standards for doing all this stuff. I'm like, here's something I actually did, and here's the nitty-gritty of it, which is not all gold standard. So let's go through that. So what I was hoping is that a lot of people would be able to follow along and ask questions as they go. One thing I wanted to mention is that I understand that this screen is being recorded. I can't guarantee that the little chat box won't pop up into this recorded screen. So please ensure that even if you're sending a private message, that it may end up being recorded. So this is what I was going to do, is go through a demonstration of a systematic review. This is something that I did. It's quite a small one, so it's feasible for sort of showing you in this sort of environment, a really short seminar. And I've got the paper and the code book online at OSF and SciArchive. So what I'll get people to do, if they haven't done so already, is if you've got EndNote, have a blank workbook open. And if you've got access to library databases, have those open. Just see if I can have this open here. Sarah, like I was trying to do for you, can you monitor the chat for questions while I go?
Yes, absolutely.
So I was going to take you through the search protocol and getting the papers out of the different databases and starting to put them in a code book for this meta-analysis that I did. And then in the session this afternoon, I'll show you how I made it into a meta-analysis with the free Excel-based software, Meta Essentials. But for now, here's the example. The research question for the purposes of today's seminar is, do emotional intelligence abilities relate to positive affect? So that's, and I developed a search string, and I'll talk you through this search string and the Boolean operators. So I searched not for just the term ability emotional intelligence, which is the technical term for this, but also the acronym for it, and also commonly used assessments. So this is the most commonly used assessment, and this is its acronym, and this is the acronym for the precursor, and this is some other assessments that are commonly used, one of which I've used the acronym for. This has the acronym STEM, and I didn't use that acronym because it means something else, like science, technology, engineering, maths, and it resulted in a lot of non-relevant hits. So I'm going to take you through today these particular databases. They weren't, I think, actually the ones that I used in this paper, but it's good to have a variety of them because they're a little bit different in how you download them into EndNote. So I also developed inclusion criteria. And as I said, this is on the simple side. So the inclusion criteria is simple. It has to be written in English because that's the only language that I speak or can understand. Has to include an assessment. And I had some sort of basic quality control over what that assessment had to be. The assessment of emotional intelligence had to be published in a test manual journal article. Had to include a measure of my second variable, positive affect, had to use original data not reported elsewhere, and had to report an effect size between emotional intelligence and positive affect, and it had to report the sample size. So that was it. And then I decided what parameters to put in my code book. So the parameters that you put in your code book, at minimum of this, you've got to have your sample size and your effect size. In addition to that, you really need to have enough information so that when you're reporting your method section, you can report like who your samples were. So this is sample type. Were they undergraduate students? Was it a forensic sample of prisoners? Was it executives at a bank? That sort of thing. So this is what I'm going to go through. There's a question here about, will the databases find articles where those search terms appear anywhere? I'll just get you to wait 5 minutes until I go into the databases, because then it should become more obvious what the answer to that is. And it's a specification you set yourself in the databases. So this is what I'm going to do. This is what I want you to follow along with, is basically search the databases and save results to EndNote, remove duplicates, remove records that don't meet inclusion criteria. This is a long process, so we're not going to go through much of that today. Set up the code book and extract the information into the code book. So these are the time-consuming processes. The search is relatively not once you've picked your search term. So download EndNote. So Sarah covered this already. I'll just mention it again. This is really annoying. Don't save EndNote library to cloud-based services. This includes things like OneDrive. You have to have it on your actual hard drive or it will corrupt, and it's a pain in the neck. If you don't have EndNote, there's many other citation services that you can use. Citavi, Mendeley, and Zotero are free. Citavi, I don't think it's free, but Mendeley and Zotero are. I use EndNote because that's what I learned and it's meant to be the gold standard. So let's go into EndNote. There's various versions of it. I use X9 because it matches up with the ARC's system. And at the time that I was using it for that purpose, it's the only one that did. So I did my other window. So here's my EndNote. I'm going to create a new library, which will have .enl. I'm going to save it to my systematic review workshop thing, and I'm going to call it EI. So what I'm going to do now, back at this worksheet, is go to the library databases. So if you're not at Sydney Uni, you'll have to go to obviously your own library, whatever library you have access to. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is go to, there's different ways I can get there, but I'm from psychology and I'm going to go to the psychology databases, which are here. So there's 31 databases. Not all of them are good for searching for articles. The one I'm going to start with is PsycInfo, and I'm just going to click on that. It's going to tell me I have to do this. So I'm going to go back to my search string. So here's my search string for emotional intelligence. And you can see that it's a lot of terms put together with the Boolean operator or. You can also see that I've used quotation marks around certain terms. If you don't use quotation marks, usually it's pretty much the same, but it means the words can be in any order. So it will pick up these words in any order, whereas if I use quotation marks, it'll only pick up situational test of emotion management. I'll also point out that occasionally when you paste stuff in like this, where you've kept a record elsewhere, it will not like the fonts for these little quotation marks and you have to type them in again. So let's see if it likes the fonts. Oh, this isn't good. It's going to be super slow. Okay, so I think, Samantha, you asked a question, what's it searching? So by default, it's searching this. I usually just leave it on the default. I often, if you're searching a single term, let's just do that actually. And you have it, this map term to subject heading, it will go there. I don't especially want to do that. So usually I would untick that so that I have control over it. So I could also search positive affect. See, I've got loads of hits. But what if there's people who look up something about positive affectivity? I might want to get those as well. So I'll put a little wildcard character that should get positive affect. So there's a little star. Positive affect, positive affectivity, positive affective something or other states. So does that get more than just positive affect? Let's have a look. Yes, it does. So what I want is all of the references that have this long search term connected with all the ors, plus this term. So I'm going to say I want 1 and 3. So you can see it's narrowed down quite a lot, the number of articles that have that. And so if we look here, this is the actual article itself, the meta-analysis that I did, but there's all these other things. Now, I'm not going to narrow it within PsycInfo. I'm going to take all of these articles and I'm going to export them to EndNote. So I clicked on all. I'm going to get all 23 of these and export them. I'm going to ask for them in EndNote format. And I'm going to make sure that I have one of these things that has the abstract in it, not just the citation, because I want to do an abstract review at my screening within EndNote. It's easier. Therefore, I want the abstract. So I'm going to go for the complete reference and export it. And then it's going to put it into EndNote. I could leave it on this default, or I could try and make it match whatever. So I'm searching here Ovid, PsycInfo Ovid. So I'll see if it has that format. Let's put it in that format. So we now have all of the references in EndNote. Sarah, can you let people into the room if you see them? I think I'm leaving people in the waiting room. So here's an example of what it looks like. It's imported 23 references, 23 references in total. If I click on this first one, I can see that it's got the authors, the year, the title, the journal, all of that information, the ISSN, keywords, abstract, all this other stuff. So this is from PsycInfo. So I am going to make a clear note to myself, on my WordPad actually, that PsycInfo produced 23 articles on the 24th of Feb. I'm going to go back into here. and don't put it on all of the library documents. So this is really important, is that you keep a record of how many hits you get in each of these. I said I will look at PsycInfo, where I've got 23 references. I'm going to go to Web of Science now. See if I can just enter my whole search term with Boolean operators. Now this is searching all fields. I would usually just keep it on the default. The reason why you sometimes shouldn't is that if you keep it on all fields and you have a particular search term, like an acronym, if you have the acronym ISSN, for example, or something like that, that will just produce a lot of irrelevant searches. Let's see if this. So we're going to export these now. This has produced 11, so it's produced a different number. And I'm going to export this. What I'm going to do actually, I remember that this, let's see if EndNote Desktop works. I mentioned earlier that there's an online version of EndNote, but I'm not using that and I find it a bit difficult to use, to be honest. So I'm going to use EndNote Desktop. I want all of the 11 records. And I don't just want that, I want everything, including the abstract. Now, see, this has a .ciw. That's not going to open in my EndNote. I know this from experience, even though it said I was downloading the references in EndNote format. What I can do instead is download the references in WIS format. So I'm going to do that instead. WIS format opens in pretty much everything. I want one that has that abstract in it. So when I was searching PsycInfo, I could just click on this and it would open. That's not going to happen here. I'll demonstrate it. Nothing's going to happen. What I have to do is go in and import it from my downloads. I just downloaded the stuff from Web of Science in WIS format, and I'm going to open it right in the library. Is everyone following along? It's very hard online to figure out if I'm going too slow or too fast.
No, it's a good pace.
Okay, so now I've got Web of Science. I've got 11 articles and I also got that in the 24th. I've got 34 in all, although you can see here that some of them are the same. This bracket one at the top was identified by both. So I'm not going to have 34 articles because some of them are the same. So I'm going to go back now into my other databases that I want to use. Scopus and Business Source Ultimate. Back into Only. Scopa sometimes does this to me. It won't let me do something that's too long. So I'm going to try something else here. I'm going to try and connect my two search terms with an and. This is experiencing technical issue. Fantastic. Good on you, Spencer. So we'll go to the next one. Business Source Ultimate. So which other databases you should search is heavily sub-discipline specific or discipline specific. So if you were looking at something from clinical sciences or medicine, you would definitely need to look at Medline or the European equivalent, which is in PsycInfo as well, in the psychology list of databases. If you were doing research in education, you would need to definitely look in ERIC, E-R-I-C. So it's really, if you wanted to get absolutely everything, you could try even minimally relevant databases. So usually you'd need, I'd say, it would be unusual to do less than 3. But it's very discipline specific how many databases and which databases you're going to look in. If you really wanted to do everything as well, you would go into Google Scholar. There's sort of a debate about whether Google Scholar is a reasonable database to use because the search, like the algorithms in the background for what comes up are like not known, they're like proprietary, but it does tend to get a lot of hits that other things don't. Google Scholar is also a pain because unless you can are highly techie and can write a bit of JavaScript that will do it, you have to download each reference one by one into your EndNote. So that was just my answer to something from the chat. So I'm in Business Source Ultimate now, and I'm again going to paste my search terms in. I'm just going to leave it on the default, but I could search all sorts of different things. So Business Source Ultimate's only resulted in 2 hits here. So what I'm going to do is Business Source Ultimate is a bit, the process of actually getting these into EndNote is a 2-step process. So what I think you have to do is first add these results to your folder. And then you go to your folder up here and export over here. So this is recommending Riz, and I recommend Riz as well because it works most of the time. I'm going to download that from Business Source Ultimate. It's called Delivery. So if I go back in here, go to my downloads where I just downloaded it. keep a note over here so that I can that. So there's a question in the chat, would your review not be considered thorough if you didn't also search Google Scholar as it brings out missed literature? So people have different views on that, whether to include Google Scholar, because it's not a recoverable search. Like if I search Google Scholar the next day, it might produce something different because the algorithms are complicated and not replicable. So what I have done in my most recent meta-analysis is to search Google Scholar, but only downloaded the top 100 references. The other thing about Google Scholar is, it's very difficult to use the same Boolean operators within the Google system. And also it will tend to produce about 10 times as many hits as anything else. Maybe I'll illustrate that now, actually. Let's try Google Scholar. So we just need to go to Google Scholar. So with everything else, I was just able to copy this text with brackets and things. But I'm not sure that this works the same way. So this has produced 4 results on Google Scholar, which is very different from what I said would happen, because previously I think it's not using the OR properly. So it's just for things with a complicated search strategy, it's a bit difficult. You can go into advanced search and see what it's doing here. So it's trying to get all of these words, oops, which is not what I actually want. So I want that exact phrase. Oh, it's just very hard to put the Boolean operators together. If I use the plus sign, will that act as or will that act as and? All over the place. So I want at least one of the words is I think what I want with the rest of it. So we can see if I think, done it correctly now. We've got something like 1,000 results. The other thing I'll point out about Google Scholar just while we're in here is the way that you need to, by default, I don't think it's set to show links to import citations into anything. I've set it up like that. But if you do that, if you go into settings here, this little thing appears, and then you can download things into EndNote. So the difficulty is that the search strings are not the same as the conventional databases. It can be worthwhile doing it, but it's not always worthwhile doing it. So I didn't prepare for Google Scholar. So I'm going to go back to Scopus and see if it's going to behave now. No, it's not liking me today. So I'm going to just stop here actually for the moment and assume that this is what we've got. So in our Prisma chart, we would list, 23 plus 11 plus 2 articles equals 36. So make sure you keep a record. Now, what I'm going to do is remove duplicates because we can see that some of these are the same. So what we can do is go in EndNote to references and find duplicates, and it will remove, hopefully, all the things that are the same. So it will So we've removed 6 duplicates using the automated process. EndNote doesn't always remove all the duplicates though. So I'm keeping a note over here, remove duplicates. Removed by automated process. But I can see that this is the same, right? It's the same set of authors, it's the same title, the same journal. So, not that I'm aware of, so the process for removing duplicates, the quick thing is that EndNote's supposed to do it all. But clearly it hasn't. So the quick thing that you're supposed to do is use your referencing software to remove duplicates like that, but it doesn't always work. So this one's clearly the same. Let's just look for authors that are the same. This one looks the same. So what it will do sometimes is not, sometimes the full names are listed, sometimes the initials are listed, or sometimes, especially if there's a lot of authors that have like umlaut or character symbols in their names in some databases, but not others. So its duplicates is a little bit annoying. Now, I'm tempted here. I'm like, I know this isn't relevant. This is a meta-analysis, so I can't use it in the meta-analysis. But I won't delete it now because otherwise that will mess up my record of how many duplicates have been removed. Same with this. This is clearly not a paper. This is some set of abstracts. It's the same. It's clearly the same. So I'm just clicking delete to move it to the trash. This is clearly irrelevant as well. Mania like elevated mood and rats. But I'm not going to delete it now because right now the task I'm doing is removing duplicates. And I've removed 9. Yeah, it's a time-consuming process. Meta-analyses are time-consuming processes. I don't know how else to to put that. So I've removed duplicates now, and the critical thing is I keep a record over here of exactly what I've done, which I'm going to save actually. Export. Yeah, so things like if you've got a massive data set like Sarah's saying, or a very large meta-analysis, and you're a well-funded team, then you can definitely use things like Covidence that make it easier. So there's a question from Ashik. Can I unmute?
There is a meta-analysis paper, so is it allowed that we can use another meta-analysis paper in our new meta-analysis?
No. So what you want is what you're trying to get is a collection of effect sizes, and the effect size from an existing meta-analysis is composed of a number of different effect sizes. If you find a meta-analysis, you can, on your topic, you can use all of the papers that went into that by searching, through their table, but you can't use their meta-analytic result. It's not part of your meta-analysis.
Yeah, so in your reference list, there is a paper which is, I think, is it Mestro J 2019? Is it meta-analysis paper?
Sorry, can you tell me what you're talking about?
Yeah, so in your that means in your end
in
note,
this paper,
in your end note, what you are showing us.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a paper in 2019. Is that not 19? 2020 is a meta-analysis. Emotional intelligence relates to emotion. So yeah, so we can include it, or we have to delete this one.
We will have to delete that one.
Okay.
Well, actually, it's kind of complicated with this paper because this is, if I open it fully, it has two parts.
Okay. Yeah,
One is a meta-analysis. We can't use data from the meta-analysis. The second part of it is original empirical data, and we could use the original empirical data in our meta-analysis.
That's great. Brilliant. Thank you.
Where am I going with this? Back to the worksheet. So that uses original data not reported in another article. So that effectively, this exclusion criteria, I guess it is, effectively cuts out other meta-analyses. It also cuts out, like, sometimes there's secondary analysis. An author has published the same data set twice, and they're not separate effects. It's the same effect in the same sample, so you can only count it once. So I've saved this. I've removed duplicates. Now I'm going to screen records individually for the inclusion exclusion criteria. So there's a few different ways that I could do that, and it really depends on the size and scope of your meta-analysis and how much you need to be really efficient. So in some cases, like what Hannah was talking about, we have a really enormous number of articles, like thousands. You might want to do a quick screen firstly by just titles, a title search, and record how many were clearly irrelevant based on title search. For something this size with 27, honestly, I would probably just do it all at once. Like just look at each paper one by one to see if it had the data that I needed, and if it didn't, why it was excluded. So what we would be doing, I'm trying to think what the best demo is. Maybe I'll go through the process of it if you have a massive data set, which is we try and decide firstly by title. This one is not obviously relevant. This one is not obviously relevant. Writing competence, obviously relevant, not obviously relevant. This one's obviously relevant. This one's obviously relevant. So I've just removed 2 based on title search. So you can see, hopefully now, why people bother to pay for Providence. So Kristen's asked, is searching for unpublished papers more relevant for meta-analyses than for scoping or systematic reviews? I think it's equally relevant for meta-analyses and systematic reviews, where the idea is that you're having a summary of everything that's available, not just things that have made it through to be published, but perhaps less so for scoping reviews. How do you find unpublished papers? So probably got some stuff here. How do you find unpublished papers? So firstly, some of the databases include dissertations. So you can look at dissertation abstracts. So these they tend to be mostly North American, but people's theses that they may or may not have published. You can also request unpublished data from people who you know work in the area. So you can ask on listservs. You can directly email like prolific researchers in the area, or if you're going to be extremely thorough, you could email all of the authors or corresponding authors from everything you found and say, you've published on blah. I'm doing a meta-analysis. Do you have any unpublished data on blah? You could look at conference paper listings. So this is, I guess, the usual way to try and find data that is not yet published, is to just request it from people who you think might have it in these various ways, as well as look at the dissertation abstracts. So what I'm doing. So remove duplicates, screen records. So I've done a title search. I would now do an abstract search one by one to see if these, if they meet these inclusion criteria. Is it in English? Does it include this, and this? Often this particular criteria uses original data not reported in another article. It's sometimes difficult to figure that out until you've actually extracted the sample size and the effect size. And then you suddenly realise that there's an authorship team who have published 2 papers that have the same sample size and effect size. And you're like, oh, I wonder if that's the same. I should ask them, or I should make a conclusion about that. So this is why I like to put the abstract there, quite short. That's ERA, which is variable 1, is associated positively with positive affect. Okay, we're going to keep that one. So Kristen's asked, how do you record your process for sourcing unpublished data? E.g. email 20 people, 3 responded with unpublished data, 10 had none, 7 non-respondents. So typically you would give them like a time period to respond in. And yeah, pretty much you would say we emailed blah researchers, and you'd say how you identified them. Like, was it anyone from your list of final papers? Did you email them? Was it anybody who had appeared two times or more on the list, or 3 times or more? Anybody who had something within the last 3 years, something like that. Like you would say, why did you identify these people to contact? Typically nobody responds or very few people respond. So I think there's not a definitive answer about the exact correct way to do it. What is important is that you keep an extremely clear record of exactly what you did and why you did it. So as Sarah is saying, she's got in the resources down here, Prisma, all of these templates. I don't know which one you're talking about, or I'm going to download it, put it there later.
I'll add a new one in.
So I'm not sure if we need to go through this whole thing, because this is the time-consuming part. So abstract by abstract, I'm going through and picking out, does it look like it meets the criteria? And if you can't tell, if it doesn't obviously not meet the criteria, I would leave it in until the next stage. Until finally, you're going in and looking at the actual paper itself to try and extract the data into the code book. So we're keeping records of everything. So we've removed the duplicates. I'm not going to do this right now. It's probably going to take back the better part of the day to do it all. One thing I'll point out with this step 5 is that some people, and it's more important in some subdisciplines than others, where there might be, it might be more difficult to make the decision about whether it meets the inclusion criteria. Some people will get multiple coders to do the screening, and not just the extraction, not just putting data in the code book, but the judgments about, does this meet the inclusion criteria or not? So I didn't, I just did it all in this particular paper, but the high-level gold standard is that you might have multiple coders. So the other thing that you might do is, once you've got, actually before I go to the final list, I'll just show you another EndNote useful thing to do, and that is that you can try to find the full text. So let's try and see if it can just locate how many, it can locate the full articles for us. So references, find full text, find full text. So you can see down here what it's doing. Not especially quickly, is EndNote is looking for the PDFs for me. What I need to actually highlight it all. Find me full text EndNote, so I don't have to go through that process myself. Not especially useful, is it? So EndNote has found me only 2. Only 2 full text things has it found. So what happened? Oh no, 3, still going. So now it's finished. It's found me a total of 5 PDFs. The rest I'll have to locate myself, but I can show you what that looks like. So for these people, for Hillary, EndNote has attached the PDF of the journal article to this paper. So I would recommend, as a storage mechanism for the PDFs, that you do attach them to the paper. So this is bracket from 2010. So if I wanted to attach it myself, I would have to go to, I'd have to find it. Let's see if I can just find this. Google Scholar. I get this PDF now. So you can see if it does that automatically, it saves a lot of time. Cool. So I'm going to go back now into what we were doing next, which is setting up the code book. So Sarah, how are we going for time? Are we trying to finish on the hour?
If possible, but we can if people don't mind staying a little bit into the lunch break, that's also fine.
Oh, if lunch is next, we can't eat into lunch with actual formal meat talking. The code book, I would normally just set it up as an Excel sheet. With the paper name, and then
Oh, Carolyn, I don't think we can hear you very well.
I'm not sure why that would be. Was it just
Sorry,
turning away? Am I good now?
oh yeah, that's much better.
So yeah, that's a really good question. If a paper contains multiple relevant groups, we put multiple entries in the code book. Yes, so if there are multiple studies, you might need to write like the study there. So it might be like Jack et al. 2010, study 1, study 2. This is actually really simple for the purposes of an explanation. What you will often also want to enter is you clearly want your effect size. So I think I've not included that, but that's the most important thing. You want your effect size, which for this particular meta-analysis is a correlation. But if it was for a mean different, you might need to have mean 1, mean 2, SD, and SD2, and then the effect size. So what I'll be talking about this afternoon is, where is it? The final data file, I put it on the Open Science Framework. And it looks like this. So it's got author year, country, population, all of this stuff. So what I've done, which is like, I think not ideal, is I've got multiple effects and I've just listed them in different rows. So this is in wide format. What is conventionally done is not this. It would be to list. So let's see for this paper, there's all of these different effects. It would be to list this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cases, or for the 10 different types of effects down the page. So Sarah has done it properly. So this is the code book that goes with the example data set, and it's available online, not just for this course, just because I followed best practice and put it online when I, as open data when I published the meta-analysis. So I think I've sort of gone through most of the processes here, and it is lunchtime. So I'll just point out that what we would be doing with our final screened, once I screened it slowly, I've kept a record of the final one with all of the PDFs, is going into the paper and identifying, usually from the method section, as the M. So this tells us the sample size and the percentage female is 74 over 123. The UK sample, and there's all this other information. I think we gave this age here. Often we report the mean age. This tells you what the measure of emotional intelligence is, which is one of my code book parameters. What I was looking for was the correlation between this, emotional intelligence, with positive affect, so 1 and 3, which is negative. There you go, that's what I would have wanted, hopefully, and so on. So I think I'm going to let people break for lunch now, and I'll stop talking except to answer any questions people might have.